Welcome to the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com for Monday, March 29, 2021. Kevin Rogers and Thom Cunningham with you as we'll take a look back at the Sweet 16 from this weekend and look ahead to the Elite Eight. We finally made it. 2 matchups tonight, 2 tomorrow. Arkansas, Baylor, Oregon State, Houston's tonight. And then tomorrow you have Michigan, UCLA, and who the hell else is playing tomorrow?
USC Gonzaga.
USC Gonzaga. That's right. Gonzaga was going to be in the national championship. I'm telling you, because all these days freaking go together. That's why. All right, let's get it started. So let's take a look at this past weekend, and let's go to L brackets. And all right, so let's start with the Sweet 16 action. And Thom and I we taped together 2 videos for VegasInsider.com with predictions. And I started 0-3. I won with UCLA as my final pick, so I know, I lost the first 3. Thom actually did very well because he had Michigan yesterday, he had USC last night, he had Baylor, and the other one was your other game you won to. Oh, it was Houston against Syracuse. You know what? There is nothing wrong with that. I don't like when people say, oh, you take all the favorites. Okay, like maybe over time it may not work, but also like in baseball, if you do it with money lines or hockey, I get it. But here, you take the favorites. Is Baylor not better than Villanova?
Right.
Is Gonzaga not better than Creighton? So let's look back at these games first, Thom. All right, the South, on the right, Baylor over Villanova, Arkansas over Oral Roberts. What were your thoughts on those games? Villanova was up early in that game and lost. Oral Roberts was up early against Arkansas. You said you liked Oral Roberts to cover the first half against Arkansas because they did that the last time. So what did you think there now going to tonight's game with Baylor and Arkansas?
Well, it's funny with Oral Roberts that they not only covered, they won outright the first half. So if you hopped on that plus value that was recommended, congrats to you for doing that. Baylor, the game that stood out to me with this region was Baylor versus Villanova. And it was more of Villanova, how well they played. There's a lot of fight in this team, and I think Villanova was playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulder throughout the tournament. They heard all the noise that was spoken about them, how they weren't good without Colin Gillespie, how that they had no chance, that they were an upset alert against Winthrop in round 1. And they really used all that very well, and they competed very well against Baylor. Now, Baylor struggled mightily shooting three-pointers in the game, particularly Jared Butler. He has been awful. And he needs to step up. Davion Mitchell, as good as he is on both ends of the court, he cannot be the best player for Baylor every single night and expect to win a national championship. At some point, Mikhail Teague and or Jared Butler are going to have to step up and play as good as Davion Mitchell is playing. And Matthew Meyer has been a life force off the bench for Baylor. And so I do think that Villanova, they were very impressive. Baylor was a bit sluggish, but Kevin, this is a very similar route that Virginia took, winning a 2019 championship. Everyone is looking for reasons to fade this Baylor team as they were Virginia in 2019. They're in the same part of the bracket in the top right corner. And much like Virginia, Baylor has had to grind and get lucky sometimes to advance each round. None of the games have really been simple for Baylor other than the first round matchup against Hartford. So there's a lot of mirroring aspects here between Baylor and the championship team of Virginia in 2019. But Baylor's defense has been very, very good. It's been consistent, and that's what's really gotten them this far and past Villanova and Wisconsin, 2 teams who played a very slow pace for Baylor in the last.
So, just going on the point about Baylor with the defense, as you see here in the bracket, they allowed 55 to Hartford, granted 16 seed, 63 to Wisconsin after they dropped 85 in North Carolina, and 51 against Baylor, or against Villanova, sorry. And the thing with Baylor, too, to stay on them for a second, Thom, that Baylor had the COVID situation, and people kind of thought that would derail their season. They barely beat Iowa State, who didn't win a game in the Big 12. They lost at Kansas. They should have lost at West Virginia, and they ended up getting bounced in the Big 12 tournament by Oklahoma State. But it's kind of like the old thing, it doesn't matter now. Like right at this point, it doesn't matter that they barely beat Iowa State last month. The COVID stuff is behind them. So now they draw Arkansas. And Arkansas, they struggled in the first game early against Colgate, came back and won. They edged a pretty good Texas Tech team in the second round. Now they face Oral Roberts, who knocked off Ohio State in overtime, beat Florida by 3, and they had Arkansas dead, Oral Roberts did, but Arkansas ends up winning that game by 2. They don't cover. So now, what chances do you think Arkansas has to maybe, forget about covering, maybe pulling off a win tonight against Baylor?
Well, I mean, I think their shot is actually pretty good. It's decent. What I find interesting about this matchup, though, is that Arkansas has been down double digits multiple times already in this tournament and a few games as well, and they've come back and won. So I would say Arkansas's biggest strength is the fact that they've proven to overcome adversity, which is a huge, huge thing to have in your back pocket when you're playing in a roulette-style tournament like March Madness is. So Arkansas has been really impressive in terms of that when they get down, they're not out. And that should be scary if you are Baylor. Baylor has started games slow this tournament. I don't know if that's going to be the case again when they face Arkansas, because Arkansas has been sluggish to start the game. It's funny, you're seeing Baylor and Arkansas. These are two teams who are starting games slow, but are averaging about 80 points a game themselves. So you have two high-octane offenses who are actually struggling in the first half of their March Madness tournament games. The point total is 149.5. That's what it opened as. And you have two teams, as just mentioned, high-octane offenses, almost 80 points a game for each school. But Arkansas has gone under the point total in 5 straight games. So this is going to be a very interesting game here. I'm not too sure what to think, but I do believe that it will be a strong finish for both teams, mainly because that's the way that they've been playing this tournament. Slow start, strong finish. It should make for a very interesting battle. The point total at 149.5 makes it very interesting, though, because, again, you have two teams who average over 80 points per game, but Arkansas has gone under in 5 straight. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the money line shifts throughout the day going into tonight's matchup.
And also, when you look at the point total, too, at least looking here on the screen at some of the closing numbers, look at these swings. And I understand you're playing teams from different conferences, different styles, that it just feels very volatile. Colgate is 161, then Texas Tech is 140.5, Oral Roberts is 157.5. Colgate's high scoring, Oral Roberts was high scoring. Now you get Baylor 148.5. That you mentioned the 5 straight unders. You wonder if now if it comes back and you have a high scoring game, just because you go 21-point dip to then a 17-point move up to now back to 9 down, that you don't see that often, that much of a change with these totals and the opponents that Arkansas has been facing. Of
the 5 games in a row that Arkansas has gone under, only one time has the point total that was given to them been under the given 148.5, 149 that is for tonight's game. So I'm with you, Kevin. I think you go against the trend here, and I do believe the point total does go over here. I don't want to say this is a lock, but it does seem like this game can go to overtime too, which would then see the point total go over. I expect both teams to touch 80, whether it takes 40 minutes of action or 45 minutes to 50 minutes of action. I just see the point total going over here. Both teams are due for a high-octane offensive show, so I think that's what we're going to get tonight.
All right, let's look at the bottom now, and we'll get back up to the top from yesterday's games. The Midwest from Saturday, and obviously the clunker that was Oregon State and Loyola Chicago. Look, I want your opinion on this, and I know this sounds like really dramatic, but early in that game, Loyola Chicago was up 3, I believe. You remember the play with the charge underneath?
Oh, yeah.
It was the and one, it would have been. They call the basket off, they call the charge. Loyola Chicago, for as much as they were struggling, they're up 5, maybe 6 with a free throw there. Instead, it gets taken away, and they're only up 3, and then Oregon State goes down, and Oregon State goes on a run. They lead at halftime, and they were in control of that game. I kind of felt like that was a huge momentum shift. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, it could have been. I'll tell you what, though. They really neutralized Krutwig in that game. Roman Silva, I think, is probably the backbone of this team that doesn't get enough credit, and Kalu is a monster as well. He does a great job scoring, because Ethan Thompson and Jared Lucas get all of the credit for the points that Oregon State produces, but they've got guys all over the place. But neutralizing Krutwig, making him a post player instead of a point post was huge, I think. And it was really the first time Cameron Krutwig went up against a body that was bigger than him. Now, Kofi Cockburn, I think, is an overall better player than Cameron Krutwig, but in terms of height, they're pretty even. Roman Silver towers over Krutwig, and you saw the rebounding issues that Loyola Chicago had in that game. So I do think what Oregon State has been able to do throughout this entire run is control the pace of play. And that also includes the big man Roman Silva, which gets absolutely no credit because when he's in the game, the offense somewhat slows down and they're able to get more second chance opportunities. I do want to talk about, though, how great Ethan Thompson has been. He can create his own shot one-on-one from anywhere on the court. And that was very evident against Loyola Chicago. When Loyola Chicago's defense was stifling Oregon State to start that game, Ethan Thompson said, screw it. And he just backed down his man a few times, did that turnaround jump shot he's so good at. He's got those long arms, and it went in a bunch of times. So Ethan Thompson, to me, is going to carry this team as far as he can take them. Although Roman Silva, to me, was the big difference in neutralizing Cameron Krutwig against the Ramblers.
I just felt like that point spread that, this was maybe the time. And again, Loyola Chicago probably played their championship in the second round against Illinois, and then the offenses both weren't good, but Oregon State did enough. And look, they won 3 straight rather in the Pac-12 tournament. They were dead to rights against UCLA, came back and won that game in overtime, beat Oregon, beat Colorado, beat up Tennessee, beat up Oklahoma State. They're not winning these games by 2 at the buzzer. They won by 14 against Tennessee, by 10 against Oklahoma State against number 1 pick in the draft in Cade Cunningham. And then they're up, and then they beat Loyola Chicago by 7. I don't think it was really that close. So now you face Houston. Right. And Houston, an excellent team out of the American who dominated Cleveland State in the first round, probably should have lost to Rutgers in the second round, but then they take care of Syracuse. Look at the Orange. Yeah. They score 78 against San Diego State, 75 against West Virginia, then 46 against Houston. That now you wonder if Oregon State's really met their match in this game tonight against Houston.
Probably. I think so. Houston is just so much more athletic than Oregon State. This is the most athletic team Oregon State will have faced in quite some time. Houston also the second best defense in the nation. I know Oregon State just beat the best defense in the nation, but again, the athleticism is far superior in Houston than it is in Loyola Chicago. Then you have the offensive rebounding issue that Oregon State is going to have to deal with. Now, again, you have Roman Silver and Kalu down low that they can bang on the boards with Houston, but Houston's offensive rebounding is why they got by Rutgers. Their defense is why they got by Syracuse. I've had Houston in my Final Four. It's almost come by process of elimination at this point, just based off the way the Midwest has gone. Give me Houston in this game. Kevin, I love Oregon State. I love the Pac-12, what they've done this year. I've been high on the Beavers and the Pac-12 as a conference for about 2.5 months now. But I thought Oregon State was going to cover against Loyola Chicago. I did not believe in Oregon State to beat Loyola Chicago, but I thought they would cover. I really think Houston covers. I think they're the far superior, better team. And Houston has the best efficiency ratio in the entire country, which, Kevin, I'm actually very huge on in this tournament. Fifth most efficient offense, second most efficient defense out of 347 schools nationally. So I'm going to go with Houston. I'm going to ride them. I had them at the beginning, so that as much as I love Oregon State in the Pac-12, and they are a walking piggy bank, I'm going to go with the Houston Cougars here. So I'm just going to stick with my bracket.
And there's nothing wrong with that. The job that Kelvin Sampson has done and how well that Houston has played so far. Look, they're a top 10 team in the country, and people don't look at them like that because they're in the American and they're not in the ACC. But last check, the ACC has no teams left. They're not in the Big East, who has no teams left. Right. They're not in. The SEC's got one left with Arkansas. The Pac-12 has been good, And look, let's shift over now to the East and Michigan. After they struggled a bit with LSU, they just took care of Florida State yesterday. They totally pulled away from them. And Florida State, who allowed 54 to UNC Greensboro, 53 to Colorado, it gives 76 to this Michigan team. And now we see why Michigan was a top seed. And now they draw UCLA, who has won 4 games in this tournament. They had to come back to beat Michigan State in the opener. And then they take care of BYU. They draw Abilene Christian, which I guess was kind of a blessing because they didn't have to worry about grinding it out with Texas. And then they get Alabama. They didn't play well to start that game. Yeah. Then they turn it on late in the first half to go up 11, and Alabama comes back. They tie it, goes back and forth, back and forth. UCLA ends up taking a 3-point lead late, and then they don't foul. before the 3. Alabama ties it to go to overtime. You wonder, okay, Alabama's going to win it now just because momentum. Alabama's got to win, and UCLA jumped out to a huge lead in overtime and won. So I guess your thoughts first. Let's start with Michigan and what you think about them, the job they did against Florida State, and what they can do here. We'll get to UCLA in a second, but as far as Michigan and the job they've done, basically the last, I would say, game and a half after the slow start with LSU, coming back and covering that first game and then dominating Florida State yesterday.
Yeah, just running through Florida State. I think Scotty Barnes had 6 early points in the game, and then that was it. Juwan Howard made it very clear, no more Barnes at the rim, because he was just getting to the rim, I believe, in 3 straight tries and laid the ball up. After that, he was gone. So, honestly, Michigan's coaching has been superb with Juwan Howard. The defense has been very, very underrated. I know that the high-octane offense of Michigan gets a lot of credit for their success, but their defense is quite remarkable. And that, again, goes to Juwan Howard. What the adjustments they made on Barnes, I thought was phenomenal, especially in-game. It's very difficult to do. When you come into halftime, you say, all right, guys, here's the new adjustments. Juwan Howard, mid-game, said that's enough of him, and they shut it down the rest of the way. Michigan's and FSU's three-point shooting, I believe, was the big story, however, entering that game and closing that game. FSU went 0 for 9 beyond the arc against UNC Greensboro. Then I believe it was only Raycon Gray who made a three-pointer in round 2. MJ Walker didn't make a 3 in the first 2 rounds. Then you come into this game against Michigan. By the way, the Wolverines, between Mike Smith and Eli Brooks, are phenomenal three-point shooters in the state of Indiana. I was running some numbers the other day, Kevin. Eli Brooks, entering that game, is 6 of 12 beyond the arc in Lucas Oil Stadium, and Mike Smith is 2 of 3. And keep in mind that Lucas Oil Stadium, I believe, was the hosting venue of the Big Ten tournament this year. So there's a little bit of advantage Michigan has. I actually like them. I actually placed a future wagers on to win the championship at plus 550 because I do think that value that's currently given to them is completely undershot for what we've seen them put out on the court. I do think Isaiah Livers not being there is a somewhat little bit of a factor if they do get to the Final Four. But this is a very, very strong team who plays very well in Indiana venues. You can go through Mackey Arena. You can go through Simon Scotch Assembly Hall, which is Bloomington, Indiana, where the Hoosiers play. And you can go to Lucas Oil Stadium. They have performed very well in those venues, specifically Eli Brooks and Mike Smith from 3. So that was the story entering the game against FSU. I think it's the story leaving the game against FSU and moving forward in the tournament for Michigan. But I'm very impressed with what I saw from a coaching standpoint against FSU, and then the three-point shooting in the state of Indiana has been electric for Michigan.
It's so interesting that you have, out of the 4 regions and out of the 8 teams left, you still have 3 1 seeds. And a lot of people have said, oh, well, is it going to be a crazy thing? Gonzaga's still alive. We'll get to them in a second. Baylor's still alive. Michigan's still alive. So you can have 3 1 seeds go to the Final Four. And I continue to say, in these bubbles over the last year with the pandemic, we saw in the NBA, the Lakers won it. They were the best team, one of the 2 best teams, them and the Bucks. In baseball, the Dodgers won it. In hockey, the Lightning won it. So really, could Oregon State win it? Sure, they could. It's not crazy. But you still they would have to beat potentially 2 1 seeds and a 2 seed the rest of the way.
And the thing is, I think you're seeing a lot of these favorites win the 2020 year of the bubble, because there's really no fans, so the pressure it goes down a little bit. You alluded to the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the Stanley Cup. How many times have we seen the Lightning lose in the playoffs or underachieve? Yeah. Suddenly, you take all the fans out, and you put them in an empty arena, and they're the best team. I do think there is something to say about the favorites performing well with no crowd due to the lack of pressure that they are feeling in the moment of the game. So it's a good point you brought up there.
Thank you. Alabama ends up, and I had said from the beginning I liked Alabama to win the whole thing. And we talked right before we started the live stream today about you make your bracket. All right, and everyone loves the brackets. But then when you get in the middle of this and what we do, you say, I don't really like him as much. And on the Free Picks video, I did take UCLA, and I still said I liked Alabama. I figured they would cover UCLA, maybe Alabama to win, so I get the cover, but then Alabama keeps going. And UCLA, look, again, another one of these teams, it's like the opposite of Oregon State, where Oregon State needed to win out just to get into the tournament. And now you see like they're just riding a huge wave of momentum, and that's great. UCLA, who was a pretty good team, lost their final 4 games of the year to USC, Oregon, Oregon State, and Colorado. 4 teams that were in the tournament from the Pac-12. They didn't lose to Cal and Washington. They lost to top-tier teams in the Pac-12. Yeah. They're down big to Michigan State. They come back and win that one in the first 4. And then they win the last 2, or going into the Alabama game against BYU and Abilene Christian in convincing fashion. Then you face an Alabama team that's thought to go to the Final Four potentially, which I thought. And now, and they end up winning that game in overtime. Now, again, momentum. They got in differently than Oregon State. But do you think now Michigan, for as well as they played, and they get UCLA coming up tomorrow night in one of the Elite 8 games, that UCLA still has a shot here?
Yeah, UCLA has a shot here. I think people are just realizing the depth of this team that I've been talking about for months now. Even without Chris Smith and Jalen Hill, 2 huge post players, key factors in UCLA's roster have been out now for a month. Chris Smith longer, pretty much the whole season. And they still have scorers everywhere. You saw it against Alabama. You got Tiger Campbell, who runs the show as quarterback. He has turned into a great scorer. A lot of people, I don't know if they are familiar with Tiger Campbell. He was a pass-first point guard. And even last year, no scoring ability really whatsoever. He was a freshman. He's still learning. New coach, Mick Cronin. He has become a prolific scorer for UCLA. And so that is huge when you have a point guard who can drive it to the rim, shoot the 3, and make almost any pass on the court. Tiger Campbell is essential to UCLA. But the story has been Yami Jaquez and Johnny Juzang and their 3-point shooting. When I don't know if you saw this shot, Kevin, Yami Jaquez, that 3-point shot where he was trying to draw a foul late in the game. He didn't get the foul call, and they actually called it a long 2, reversed it to a 3 after replay. That shot went in. It had no business going in. At that moment, you knew the game was over because there was not. When those shots are going in for UCLA, there was nothing Alabama could do in that game. But UCLA, their 3-point shooting was highly efficient to end the first half. It was highly efficient to end the second half, mostly thanks to Johnny Juzang and Yami Jaquez. And Alabama's free throw shooting. I asked you before we hopped on here, Kevin, was Alabama's lack of free throws? They went 11 of 26 from the line last night. Was that one of the greatest choke jobs you've seen in sports recently? To me, it kind of was, especially when Herb Jones is on the line. They're down a point, and he misses both free throws or something like that before Reese hits that 3. To me, it just felt like Alabama choked this game away. Although UCLA played very well, UCLA had to make a ton of difficult shots while Alabama missed you will never see a team miss that many free throws again anytime soon. 11 of 26 is horrendous. So it took a little bit of an anomaly for UCLA to win this game, but they got the job done. They can beat Michigan. They're deep enough. They're talented enough. They are now tough enough, which was not something they were at the beginning of the year. Mick Cronin has really instilled toughness in that team. But no, I'm going with Michigan. Michigan has, quite frankly, proven doubters wrong without Isaiah Livers playing. So I'm going to go with Michigan over UCLA, but UCLA, what's the old phrase, Kevin? Better lucky than good? UCLA is both right now. They are good and they are lucky, so I don't know how you stop that.
Well, let's now look at the top. And the West, Gonzaga and USC. Gonzaga, this is their lowest price they're laying, which, again, it should be because USC is the best team they're playing, and it's still 9. And obviously, USC and the job they've done so far in the tournament, they beat Drake by 16. They beat Kansas by 34. They beat Oregon by 14. So every win by double digits in the last 2 rounds. I mean, you're beating 2 quality teams in Oregon and Kansas. And Oregon ran Iowa before that. So Oregon, they get to the Sweet 16 and they only win 1 game. But anyway, so they play Gonzaga now. And Gonzaga, you see the numbers, what they put up in the first 3 rounds, 98, 87, 83. We know they're a machine. And now you're laying 9 against a really good USC team. And Andy Enfield, one of the great NCAA Tournament ATS coaches ever, with Florida Gulf Coast, and then with USC, he's a covering machine. And now you got to Now you got to cover 9 against this Gonzaga team that, again, a lot of people think are going to win the championship.
Yeah, and I believe it opened at 9.5 maybe, so I think the public is kind of leaning towards the Trojans a little bit more. I certainly am in terms of covering the spread. In no way, shape, or form am I going to take USC to win this game, but I think their odds of winning are much better than what people are giving them credit for, because you fall in love with how well Gonzaga's played this year and what they've been doing. This is the first test, I think, for Gonzaga where they're going to face big men that can challenge Drew Timme. USC is the longest team in the country outside of FSU. You have the Mobley brothers. To me, I think USC is set up better than any other team that Gonzaga has faced this season to beat Gonzaga, just based off how they play, their style of play, their length, their size, their three-point shooting as well. Tajay Eddie, very, very good from beyond the arc. This is going to be a battle. I read somewhere on Twitter that Gonzaga, the number 1 2-point field goal percentage in history, is going to be taking on USC, the number 1 2-point percentage defense in NCAA history. So this is going to be a really, really fun battle. I think it's a lot closer than what people think. I'll take USC to cover the spread. I think Gonzaga wins by about 7 or 8 points. They might touch 80, but USC's defense is very, very good. Gonzaga, they can hit the three, but they're not a three-point shooting team. So if USC's defense plays well in the paint, expect Gonzaga to be forced to shoot more outside shots, and then the game will just come down to if Gonzaga can make their three-pointers or not. I'm going to go Zaga winning, but USC covering to me seems likely. You say Enfield is 10-0 ATS in March Madness? So, yeah, give me the Trojans.
Who in your mind was the best team in the Pac-12 this year? And not because of what you've just seen, but through the regular season, who do you think was the best team in the Pac-12?
USC. It's been USC, and you know, Kevin, I've said this a few times about USC. Even when they had 4 losses, they were ranked 16th in the nation. I went out on record and said that's too low. You know, this is a 4-loss team in a major power conference, and they're ranked 16th. They should be 12 minimum. They ended up losing. We don't need to get further into that. So they ended up losing and backing down in the rankings. But the whole Pac-12 has been underrated this year. USC is at the top of that list. The size, the coaching, the talent. I mean, Mobley is going to be a top pick in the draft. This is just a very overlooked team. I still think Gonzaga is the best team, but USC they should keep this game close, basically, because they have the talent and the size to do so and to challenge the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
Well, I guess more of the reason I asked that question was just stay with me on this. That out of Gonzaga's opponents, right, Norfolk State, all right, there's a major class mismatch there, so we're going to throw them out. But the last two, Oklahoma and Creighton.
Right.
Oklahoma was not the best team in the Big 12 by any stretch. They barely beat Missouri, who was so all over the place, and Oklahoma was without one of their top players. Creighton was not the best team in the Big East. It was Villanova for the most part.
Right.
Creighton ends up beating Santa Barbara and Ohio in their 2 games. They beat 2 mid-majors. So USC, who beat Kansas and Oregon.
Handily.
Yeah, 34 points against Kansas, 14 against Oregon. That, again, not saying that USC is going to just automatically beat Gonzaga, but, we always talk about this, that Gonzaga gets a bad rap because they're in the WCC, and that's the conference they're in. If they were in the Pac-12, they're not going to be 28-0 or 26. They're going to be 29-0, whatever the record is. They still be very good. But now you're going to be challenged by a team that's the best team in their conference. And I just think that this will be a lot closer a game than people think.
No, you're right. It will be. USC, they're just overlooked, which is funny because they're so tall and they're constantly overlooked as a team. So I'm with you on that, Kevin, in terms of Creighton. They weren't the best team in the Big East. They were certainly if they were not the best team in the Big East, they were number 2. And you can make that same argument for USC. If they were not the best team in the Pac-12, they were easily number 2 or 3. I mean, you're splitting hairs at that point. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think this game's a lot closer than people think. I think a lot of people are falling in love with Gonzaga for, you should, obvious reasons. They're very, very good. It's hard not to. But, yeah, USC. Andy Enfield, 10-0 ATS in March Madness, so there's that. USC, they were 19-13 on the ATS as a team this year, whereas Gonzaga is 15-12-2. And you take those 2 pushes, you throw them into the non-covered column, then Gonzaga is 15-14 on the ATS. So USC is better at covering the spread with a tougher schedule, you could argue, in the tougher conference. I like USC to cover here. Again, I'm not taking them to win, but if USC wins, I think, Kevin, you and I won't be as surprised as maybe much of the national media might be, because there are signs, big neon flashing signs pointing towards USC being a possible upset alert here. So look for the Trojans to cover.
Out of these 4 matchups the next 2 days, because tomorrow we'll obviously touch on Gonzaga, USC again, and Michigan, UCLA, and look back at the 2. Is there any result tonight, or I guess in the next 2 nights, is there any result that would surprise you because you have an 11 seed, you have a 12 seed, even Arkansas is a 3, you think, all right, well, they're not as good as Baylor, and USC against Gonzaga. Is there one result that would totally surprise you out of these 4 the next 2 nights?
Yeah, I think the one result would be UCLA over Michigan. And not only, I think UCLA can win this game. Covering, though, is going to be tricky, I think, with the +7. Michigan's 19-8 on the ATS this year, and UCLA is 16-14, so they can cover. But Michigan, what I saw from them against FSU was highly impressive. I think the roots of this team's success go much deeper than what appears on surface as well. There's a lot of camaraderie in that locker room that we are not given access to. And so I do think it would be a shock if UCLA won outright against Michigan. Covering, not so surprising, but I would be still a little bit surprised if Michigan does not run UCLA. UCLA is going to need Johnny Juzang and Yami Jacquez to play as well, if not better, than they've performed already. And that seems like an incredibly tall order and an incredibly tall task. So UCLA would be, I think, my biggest surprise, although they might have some of the best depth and talent left in the tournament. But Michigan, my God, they just look like a buzzsaw right now. And they don't even have Isaiah Livers. So I'm just overly impressed with Michigan. UCLA would be my big surprise.
How crazy would that be if you had USC and UCLA in the championship?
Oh, wow, that'd be amazing.
I mean, and UCLA's already lost them twice. So
what if you have 3 Pac-12s in the Final Four?
You know what? With that, and there was a tweet. I think it was Dave Pasch, who's the voice. It was one of the college basketball voice on ESPN, as the voice of the Arizona Cardinals on radio. He works with Bill Walton all the time, and Bill Walton's kooky and crazy. And Bill Walton's like, "There's gonna be 5 teams from the Pac-12 in the Final Four. There's gonna be 5 of them." And he said the 5 that were in the tournament: Oregon, Oregon State, UCLA, USC, and Colorado. And you can have 3 of them. I mean, in all seriousness, even if you got one of them, would be crazy, but. Like Oregon State, I mean, we talked about this before. They lost to Portland in non-conference play. Portland, who was the worst team in the WCC, who's been the worst team for years. Yeah. Oregon State lost them in overtime, and that was so long ago. I mean, UCLA lost to Washington State a few months ago, and I mean, USC really doesn't have any bad losses per se. They lost to Colorado 3 times, but it all doesn't matter now. Like that's the point of this tournament, is that it doesn't matter if you make it. Even if Oregon State gets blown out by Houston, still getting 3 wins, going to the Elite 8 is still a great job by the Beavers. So that's what we have for the tournament, and we have the 2 games tonight: Baylor, Arkansas, and Oregon State, Houston. You can check out the previews. You can go to the homepage and find them there. Also, a lot of NBA tonight as well. Pelicans, Celtics, Bucks, Clippers. Those are the 2 NBA TV games tonight, and that's obviously going to be a very good game at Staples Center. Bucks, Clippers. Oh, yeah. Tom pointing at the NASCAR race that got pushed back on the dirt. They got hopefully the mud cleared up in Bristol, Tennessee. You have the big race there tonight, so that should be kind of interesting to see how that one goes. Yeah, and also college basketball, you want to buy picks for tonight, go to our buy picks page, and you see the selections there. $29.95 for tonight's picks. Also, guaranteed picks are up. $39.95. Pay after it wins. If it loses, you pay nothing. If it wins, you pay, but you got a winner. So that's the look for college basketball, also for NBA and NHL. So we have all of that. Very busy time. And Tom, Thursday, Major League Baseball is back. It's coming back. I know you're excited about it.
I'm ready.
It's baseball versus F1. I don't know if you can fit all that into your schedule.
Well, I cleaned up F1 pretty nicely this weekend. Was able to get good odds on a virtual safety car in F1. So, yeah, we'll see if I can get MLB success the way that we started F1 this year. But baseball's back. I'm really excited. My Yankees hopefully will do well. But we still don't really have the luck on our side. We seem to spend a ton of money and then never cash out when it's time to win a championship. But maybe that'll change this year. We'll see.
Well, I think I saw since it's been 15 or 18 years or so that the Yankees have won one World Series or been to one World Series, which is kind of against the Phillies, which is crazy. So, anyway, for Thom Cunningham, I am Kevin Rogers. We appreciate you watching, and we will talk to you again tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern for the Daily Insider right here on VegasInsider.com.
Good luck.